Jerry.
Hey, welcome back on the Ozark CW and KY3.com online. I'm Jerry Jacob. We're at Willard High School, where we're having a candidate forum here sponsored by the Lock and Smith Foundation and featuring the Republican candidates for the United States Senate seat from Missouri to take on Claire McCaskill in the general election in November. We have done general government philosophy, healthcare, and now on to economics. And Mr. Jeff Baker, who is the superintendent of schools here at the
President of the school board.
President of the school board.
I haven't yet acquired the superintendent's job, but
I can see it in your eyes. You're one, but works with the school board here, the president of the school board here at Willard, a fantastic school district. I think we all agree by the facilities and the students that have been produced. The economy, it's all yours.
okay. And I realize that this is everyone's, probably the audience's most important topic as well. So we're going to pick up the pace and we're going to move through a few things. I apologize to the folks here in the room and watching us over the airwaves. We've provided the candidates with some graphs, which I'm going to refer them to. You won't be able to see them, but you can probably imagine if I give you a good enough description. So the first one I'd like to refer you to is chart number 14. And this is a graph from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows the headline unemployment rate and the labor force participation rate over the past 40 years. That headline unemployment rate, as everyone probably knows, is currently 8.2%, down from a peak of 10% in October of 2009. However, the labor force participation rate, which measures the number of Americans working as a percentage of the total labor force, is currently at 63.8%. This is matching a level that was last seen in 1983, and this level has been trending down continuously since the year 2000. In addition, over 42.5% of unemployed workers have been without a job for 27 weeks or longer, and another 2.4 million workers are folks that have left the labor force or have not even pursued employment in the last month, and so are not counted as unemployed in that 8.2%. U6, which is a rate also provided by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, includes these longer-term unemployed in a rate. If you include those, the U6 rate is 14.5% currently. These numbers suggest that a substantial number of Americans are chronically unemployed. My question is, what specific federal policy is most contributing to these sustained high numbers of long-term unemployed, and what one of your policy proposals would most directly impact this chronic unemployment issue? And I would like to start with Mr. Beck.
Well, the biggest problem we have is they've sent our factories over to other nations. We do not have the employment here. The reason there's 25 million people out of jobs is there's not any jobs for them. When you take all of your small factories out of a small town, not only in the state of Missouri, but across this nation, and you compile them into one large conglomerate factories and you send them over other nations, you don't have the work for the people. You don't have the taxation. Not only is it against the American people, our IRS does not have the taxation coming in. When we had
what federal policy, what specific federal policy is leading to this result?
I think it is the lack of jobs, not having our factories here.
Mr. Bruner?
You know, as we'd say in the Marine Corps, Missourians and Americans are in a hurt locker. We're discouraged, we're beaten down, and your chart is very riveting. It's a discouragement chart. It's a chart that's weighing on everybody. When people are exiting the workplace and unemployment's going up, it is not a bright picture here. And I believe in a two-pronged attack: bold, disciplined, and decisive. And it has to be a two-column advance on this. Number one is cutting the spending in the balanced budget amendment. And I know you want to keep these questions quick here, but I'm ready and prepared to go into a number of different opportunities in terms of cutting the spending. But I think what's not talked about enough is how are we going to grow? Because I know in my own family business, when Dad and I, we'd look at the issues, how tough they were, different years, many years, and finally we made the necessary cuts, what we could do, we kept the jobs, and then he would say, John, the answers are outside the swinging doors, let's go get some orders. America needs orders. And I have a 4-point plan here, and I think you need all 4, because any one of these on their own will help. And I'll do this very quickly. we need an energy plan. And we know that we have all the energy we need, and we know that Claire McCaskill, with President Obama, has shut down the coal industry. 80% of our energy in Missouri is coal-derived. We know that lower energy prices make us more competitive with our agriculture, and will bring factories, back to your point, back here, because we have a lower cost. Number two, we have to cut out these red tape regulations. And we know that for small businesses to meet these federal guidelines cost over $10,583 a person. We know there's 4,000 new regulations coming down the pipeline. That's where they're hunkering down. But we have H.R. 527 and Senate 1938 in terms of how we're going to make these regulations go away and roll back these regulations, have economic impact studies, as well as sunset legislation. The third, we can't survive with the highest tax rate. We need a fair, flatter tax rate. And we know that at the end of this calendar year, there's going to be over 200 more taxes dumped into the system if Congress doesn't act. We also know we have a problem with state taxes. And finally, we need tort reform here. Tort reform is what has caused our earlier questions in terms of our health care, and it's a tremendous overhang and burden that we have here in our small businesses and our small companies. And as a side note, this is a particular area where I differ from Treasurer Steelman. I'm for tort reform and bringing some reasonableness here to businesses as well as the healthcare industry. And regrettably, she took a different position when she served in the Missouri Senate.
Thank you. Ms. Steelman?
Well, in a word, I think the unemployment is caused by government policies in general. And there's all of these policies that contribute to the uncertainty in the economy. And what I hear from people time and time again, businesses, manufacturers, is that they are unwilling to expand because of a variety of reasons. Obamacare is one of those. The humongous amount of rules and regulations and federal regulators that have dumped on small businesses or agriculture. I mean, whether it's the EPA or whether it's, coming in and trying to tell farmers that they can't hire 14-year-olds anymore. I mean, ridiculous things like that. Then we have a huge national debt of $16 trillion that equals the same size as our entire economy. So we've got to address these issues kind of as a total. And so what I put out many months ago is what I would do in the first 60 days of office. And that includes a balanced budget amendment with the cap on the size of government, because we have to quit spending money we do not have. We need to reform taxes, and I think we need to move to a fairer, flatter, simpler tax where you broaden the base and lower the rate. I think we need a sound monetary policy, which we do not have today. We need a moratorium on all rules and regulations and make Congress go back in and look at every single one of them to see if they're worth keeping and what their effect is, or whether just to get rid of them. These things, I think, would, and an energy plan, excuse me, that was the other thing, definitely need to lower the cost of gas and fuel in our economy, and we can do that if we just drill for domestic oil wherever we can, offshore, ANWR, public lands, all of it. So those things taken together, I think, would address both the revenue side of the equation, which is too big, government is too big and needs to be smaller, and reduce the debt, plus the growth in the economy, and put into place pro-growth economic policies, like I've suggested, that'll get the economy moving once again. Okay. And just to, since he brought up this, I completely support tort reform, and I've said so, and my record demonstrates that.
Congressman Aiken?
I'm going to try to do what you said, keep as focused as I can.
Thank you.
I think the question is on unemployment.
Yes.
Okay? Now, the government, this is one of the first things we hear is, I'm going to create jobs. That's a bunch of baloney. The government never can create jobs, but they sure can mess them up. And we've done a whole series of things which are driving unemployment. You want to point a finger at somebody, it's your federal government, and it's the president that's causing this problem. And probably, I would say, the top job killers are a combination of taxes, tremendously excessive red tape, and the uncertainty of a government that's a little nutty. And you put those three together and you got a job-killing package. And the numbers that you have didn't happen by accident. They happened because we have lousy federal policies. But you told me I could only talk about one policy initiative, not a list of 5 or 6. So I tried to figure out an ingenious way to put it all into one thing. And this is what my one thing would be. This is a pill that helps you kill socialism. And what you do is you take the common sense of Missouri, where we index the size of the state government to the state economy, and we do that as a constitutional amendment in Washington, D.C. That's my favorite wish. So you effectively say the federal government can never get bigger than this percentage of GDP. And what that then does is it makes all the politicians fight over who's going to have the limited size government, what you're going to use it for. But bottom line is we have policies that are hostile to jobs. In fact, we even have a president said he's intending to kill the coal industry, and he has his secretary says he's going to crucify oil and gas. What a wonderful approach. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Beck?
The problem we have in our country today is we should be manufacturing everything at the Walmart. You sell in Walmart stores, Target stores, and these. We're not. We're manufacturing them 4,000 miles away. Well, you know who's paying for that manufactured 4,000 miles away? That's the American public goes and buy those products because they add the tax on that product to pay for those large ships that come from 4,000 miles away that has trouble with nature, has trouble with shipping, and they manufacture products that are they're flawed, and they won't reproduce the good products that are flawed. So what we've got to do, we've got to start returning our manufacturing back to this nation. If we don't, this nation will collapse, and it will collapse quickly. We are on a time machine, and that time machine has run out for everybody. So what we've got to do, we got to get our heads together. Everybody here that's a Republican, no matter who they are, they got to get their heads together, and they got to figure out how we can get the leadership to straighten this out, because if we don't, this thing is going to collapse, and it could collapse before the election.
Thank you. Mr. Memley?
Women and men, men and women, I'm asking for a job as your U.S. Senator, so would you please vote for me? Now, what will I do as a member of the U.S. Senate? I'm going to strongly advocate a universal job application form that's supported both by labor, business, government, and communities. The reason being is one of the biggest mistakes that I made in my past is collecting unemployment insurance. It penalizes families in numerous ways, and all I have to say is income taxes. People don't budget for income taxes when you collect it. So I've learned from my mistakes, and what I will do is I'm going to propose things that will create real demand in America. And when you talk to a business person, they'll say, the biggest concern that we have is we don't know how many customers are going to line up at our door. As a result of that, there's a lot of fluidity in employment roles. And even though I mentioned it earlier, if you get to the scene 28 and surrounded by trees, it talks about the importance of staying close to the customer, because when you can do that, companies have a desire to keep you employed. And what I hope for Missouri, because of the 7 reasons that we posted onto Twitter and Facebook, is we should be the state building components for our energy and high-speed rail industry. The reason being is we're adjacent to the Mississippi River. We could ship the parts anywhere in the world. And for the rest of the reasons, please go to M. Memley on Twitter or Facebook.
Thank you.
ATB Trucks, thanks.
I'd like to now refer you to charts 17 through 20. These show federal outlays by category from the White House's own Office of Management and Budget for the past 50 years. On a gross basis as a percent of GDP, and most dramatically as a percentage of total outlays, payments to individuals, which is one of the categories that they break out. This includes primarily welfare payments, Medicare payments, Social Security, and retirement payments are driving federal spending. That's shown clearly by the charts. Chart 20 The next chart, also derived from the Office of Management and Budget, shows that these payments to individuals, and for those of you looking at the charts, that's the red dotted line, now exceed by themselves the total revenue collected from all sources by the federal government. And this is coming from individual income taxes, Social Security taxes, corporate taxes, excise taxes, and all other revenues. All of those are being exceeded by the amount of outlays that are provided strictly to individual folks in the United States. Do you believe that these government transfer payments produce a stimulus to the economy of their own account? If so, could you please give me an example of how this occurs? And which one, if you decide that those don't provide a direct stimulus, and then how would you propose, or which of your policy proposals would most directly affect the growth of these programs? Mr. Mimley.
No, they do not contribute to our economy, and what I would advocate as your U.S. Senator is that programs be transitioned over to states, because states could better monitor what is to be offered citizens, and as they see their economy changing, they could make adjustments. Governor Cusick in Ohio proved that, because when he took over, unemployment was significantly higher than it is today. So states can be more responsive to people's wishes than having our federal government. And the second thing is, we have to reduce costs across the board. Any person that looks at their utility bill, whenever they see it discounted by $20, that means a lot. So the emphasis should be on what we can do as a government to reduce everyone's costs, because our favorite motto is, when everybody's cost of living is lowered, everyone's standard of living is raised.
Thank you. Mr. Beck?
I believe that you take your electricity and your bills. If you don't have a job, you don't have freedoms, and you can't pay your electric, or you can't pay your phone bill, or you can't pay your rent, or you can't pay your car payment, you can't go on vacation, and you can't put your kids in college. If we don't get this straightened out, and I mean getting straightened out this time, there will not be another time, because we are in such a bad shape. Whether they're in Washington, D.C., they are in between a rock and a hard place. They don't know what to do. Their rules and regulations has brought on the entitlements. Well, the rules and regulation and the entitlements are what is destroying our economy today. And when you put rules and regulations on the corporation, they have to raise the price of the goods that they sell in these stores at Walmart and Target and every place else. So you have, you're paying for all this no matter what happens. And when the government gives these large corporations entitlements, you as a taxpayer are paying for those entitlements and nobody else. So what we've got to do is we got to find out some way to get rid of the rules and regulations and some of these entitlements. I know you can't get rid of them all, but you can get rid of them, enough of them, that will get this thing maybe straightened out.
Thank you. Congressman Aiken?
Yeah, just could you repeat the second half of your question? Your first question is, do all of these different types of government handouts provide stimulus? The second question was what?
Which one of your policy proposals would most directly affect the growth of these payments to individuals, presumably to flatten the curve?
Yeah, right. Well, first of all, no, they don't do anything in terms of stimulus. The whole idea of stimulus is a Keynesian myth, and you hear the Democrats saying this. If we cut government spending, it's going to destabilize the economy. No, it won't. It's going to get the economy going. They're crazy, and Keynes's theories were proved wrong. Henry Morgenthau, Secretary of Treasury under FDR, tried all this baloney for 10 years, came to the Budget Committee and said, we've tried it and it doesn't work. All we are is in debt a whole lot, and we got the same level of unemployment.
So you're saying you don't believe in a Keynesian multiplier effect?
No, I don't believe in anything Keynesian whatsoever, no. And I believe the anecdote for that is productivity. That's what we need to be thinking. The second thing is, how do you get rid of this stuff? Well, you have to stop voting for the programs that put it in, or modify them some and adjust to try and pull away from them slowly, depending on whether you want to go cold turkey and get rid of all of socialism at once, or you sort of phase out. I think you got to phase out different things in different ways. But my particular voting record is one that I haven't voted for this stuff. Particularly, I noticed that the food stamps have gone up, their use have gone up 68% in the last couple of years, while we're cutting defense 20%. That is totally nuts. And I think that we're overtaxing the people at work, and we're overpaying the people who don't work. And I haven't voted for those kinds of programs.
How do you respond to people that would say that that's turning your back on the most needy of our society?
Oh, I would love to respond to what they say that. I don't think there's anything compassionate about locking somebody into a sense of dependency and helplessness to the government. This isn't just an economic question, this is a moral question. I believe that every single one of us were created by God for a purpose. And the fact that we're upright and taking nourishment means there's still work that He has for us to do. And when we short-circuit that and make somebody believe that they can't succeed and that they're no good and they're dependent on the government, that is a moral evil as well as an economic mess.
Thank you. Ms. Steelman?
Well, the reason our country has had the greatest economy in the history of the world is because it combined two very important thoughts. That was freedom and capitalism. And in order for us to preserve the economy that we have enjoyed, we need to remember that. And what bigger government does is it takes away your freedom. Well, you know, whether we're going into debt or whether we're causing dependency on government. Either way, it's taking away people's freedom, and that is what we need to get away from. To specifically address your policies, I would go back to the author of that book, Capitalism and Freedom, which is Milton Friedman, who understood what it took to get an economy going again, and he called it the permanent income hypothesis. It said this, it said that basically the more of your income that you get to keep, and that you know you'll get to keep for a long period of time, then you're going to spend more. What does that mean in policy terms? That means that we got to quit taxing people to death. I mean, we've got literally a state tax too. We've got to get rid of the tax system that we have today and move, like as I have suggested, toward a fairer, flatter, more simpler tax where you close a lot of the loopholes that exist today, and you broaden that base, and you bring down the rate as low as you can, and you get more people with skin in the game, more tax, creating more jobs, therefore you're creating more taxpayers, and that's the way you get this economy moving again and get away from this dependency class.
Thank you. Mr. Bruner, I'm going to presume that you're in somewhat of an agreement with the general thoughts that have been presented here. And I'm going to ask you to expand on this because the vast majority of Americans, if you ask them individually, they're going to say that they're paying enough in taxes, that their taxes shouldn't go up. And similarly, that their particular federal tax dollars that they may be receiving are through programs that are urgently needed. So given that individual citizens and voters are going to provide that as the explanation to you, how are you proposing, or how would you propose that the federal government get a handle on these programs? Because not one program will be identified by any particular voter as being unnecessary, yet I think the panel thus far has been in agreement that there's a substantial number of programs that need to be cut or modified.
Well, you know, I liken to this kind of debate in terms of what I got to keep or not keep, as though there were three people arguing about the dinner bill on the Titanic. I mean, the issue is the ship is going down. It's not how we're carving up whatever's on the menu that night. And tied in to your earlier question here, we don't need more stimulus. We need more jobs. That is the upside opportunity. And everybody's focusing on limited funds, using debt for stimulus, and debt comes back to harm everybody. I mean, we all know what 40 cents out of every dollar is being borrowed right now for both federal and statewide. We're continuing to increase the debt. we're getting down to look at some of these programs are very important for those who are very much in need. There'll be arguments and debate about all of these programs, but I come down, and I guess I have to zero down to two areas here that will really change this thing around and open up the opportunity, because I tell you, at the end of the day, when you have more jobs, you have more taxpayers. You have more taxpayers, you have more revenues, and there's more opportunities that come to the table. And that goes down to two key issues, again, energy and these excessive regulations, because the jobs are almost in suspension, ready to take over, ready to implode into the marketplace if we just get big government to back off the regulations and we allow energy development that is sitting right beneath our feet.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to regulation in a moment. Mr. Beck?
The problem that we have today is the government is doing service jobs. A service job is dependent upon those who do own their own manufacturing product and distribute it and take care of it. And you can't take entitlements, you can't borrow money, because if you borrow money and you do service jobs, that's an entitlement. Everything's an entitlement. That's the problem we're in today in the government. We have got to go back to manufacturing and to bringing that tax base in that would pay the entitlements for these people that don't have the money, and help these people that have their problems, and the teachers and the people that like their entitlements could keep their entitlements if we had our manufacturing base back here producing the tax base for the American people. What we're having today, our churches are filling the system because the people don't have the manufacturing jobs to donate to the churches or to the charities or anything else. We have got to restore and reboot our manufacturing base or we will collapse.
Thank you. You talk about, several of you have mentioned the loss of manufacturing jobs.
Do you want me to answer that question?
I think,
I didn't answer it yet.
okay.
No, he did not.
Go ahead.
Thanks. The reason why I'm running for U.S. Senator is because I want to offer people more opportunity. You talk to any person that's collecting a government subsidy or a handout or whatever payment, they're not happy about it. People in America want to be self-sufficient, yet we've created so many programs that force regulation and other things on companies that they've had to pull back. And where do they pull back? They pull back on their employee staff. So the first thing I would do is offer what's known as a team government approach. What does that mean? It's responsive government offering solutions. And our government should take advantage of technology, and it hasn't. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. Take a company in Missouri that has an opening, and you match that opening with a skill set of people. Then the Department of Labor, both here in our state and in our nation's capital, can say, you might apply for this particular job because your skill set matches what the company is looking for. And I keep on referring to Surrounded by Trees, but it's so important these ideas are offered so that each person is able to work that can. The reason why it's so important to our economy is that when people are able to work for an extended period of time, well into their 70s, they'll collect less from Social Security and Medicare. It'll cost our government less, and by being active, their medical costs are reduced. So everything is tied into this employment question. It's very important, and I encourage you to go to memely.org to see what we've learned and offered as a result of meeting the great people of Missouri. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're down to about 4 minutes, and I would like to try to get 2 quick questions in. One's going to be, the last question will be a yes or no question, and this first one's going to be a quick down the line. I wanted to get to regulation, but we're going to talk instead of, many of you have mentioned that you propose that free market capitalism is the basis on which you think many of these solutions are going to come about. I have a simple question for each of you. Do you think the United States of America is currently operating on a free market capitalistic economy? Mr. Beck.
No.
Mr. Bruner?
We're finding a free market economy that's continuing to be restricted every day by more and more regulations, but we can reverse that.
Thank you. Congressman Aiken?
Yeah, we're just transitioning away from free market. Started there and we're moving away from it.
Thank you. Ms. Steelman?
No, it doesn't completely reflect a free market system with too many regulations and crony capitalism, because there's a lot of that going on as well.
Mr. Memley?
No, and then when you check out K Street in Washington, D.C., and the amount of lobbying that's currently being done, we're not operating under a free enterprise system.
Thank you. The last question is one on taxation, and I wanted this to be a more broad discussion, but let's simplify it. Simply, do you support H.R. 25, the fair tax bill that's being sponsored by Congressman Rob Woodall?
I'm not familiar with that particular
It's the
bill.
fair tax. Oh, you're not familiar with the fair tax
Well,
bill?
I'm familiar with fair tax, and the reason why I'm not a fair tax advocate at this point is that our current system rewards people for investing in communities because of the mortgage tax deduction. If a fair tax takes that away, we'll end up paying more taxes as a community. So at this point, I would not be supportive of it, mindful of that these beautiful schools like we have here in Willard are supported by property taxes.
Mrs. Steelman?
Well, as I've mentioned earlier, I support moving towards a fairer, flatter, simpler tax. But I want to say that the tax system we have today is so corrupt and so bad that anything would be better than we have today. And I think that the fair tax is a very interesting concept to consider.
Thank you. Congressman Aiken?
Well, the tax we have today is the second worst. The value-added tax is absolutely the worst. I am a co-sponsor of the fair tax. I think it has a lot to be said for it because, one, you're taxing consumption and you're not taxing productivity. It has a lot of appeal to get rid of the IRS. The trouble with the income tax system today, it's got so many manipulative parts. You're trying to guide people on how they behave, and getting rid of that, a flat tax would too, but a fair tax, I think, has the additional benefit. So that's why I'm a co-sponsor.
Thank you. Mr. Bruner?
You know, I'm personally motivated by a sense of urgency in terms of what we can get done quickly because the direction the economy is going and the problems of the jobs. And I've done some research on the fair tax, and I think it has some very sound attributes and opportunities. But I'm looking realistically, how long will that take to do in the way this economy is? So I would quickly move to a fair, flatter tax. Those type of taxes supported by so many good senators, Tom Coburn, Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, DeMint, Rand Paul, to get that down there as quickly as we can to begin to stimulate free enterprise and private jobs and private enterprise and get it done. Now, once we get the economy stabilized and business is moving again, then we can look at some of these other issues in terms of a better
Thank you.
program.
Quickly, Mr. Beck, we're running out of
I
time.
believe that we should keep our present tax base. The only thing we need to do is bring our jobs back to bring the taxes in to pay the IRS and anybody else, and we don't need to get rid of our IRS. They have a function in this country and always have had.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Jeff Baker, thank you very much. Dr. John Lilly, Mr. Darren Chappell, a round of applause for our panelists here. Not just for the questions for the candidates, for educating us all in these very important issues, and to the candidates as well, a round of applause for coming here tonight and enlightening us on your plans and opinions. Each candidate, as well as your eventual opponent, Claire McCaskill, has a website. You can Google search any of their names and find it, find out their plans and opinions in greater detail if you choose to do so. For now, thank you for watching. Thank you to Willard School District for hosting this tonight. Thank you to the Lockett Smith Foundation for hosting this debate as well. I'm Jerry Jacob. Thank you for watching on the Ozarks CW and on KY3.com. Have a good evening.
We get to keep our iPads here.